Imagine this. You're thousands of feet in the air, enjoying a smooth flight. The hum of the engines is steady. The clouds drift lazily below you, and everything feels normal. But suddenly, without warning, something unimaginable happens. The very planet beneath you stops spinning. Not gradually, not over millions of years, but instantly, for 10 seconds. Right now, as you sit in your seat watching this video, the Earth is spinning at an astonishing speed of approximately 1,000 miles per hour, 1,600 kilometers per hour at the equator. That's faster than a jetliner. But you don't feel it because everything around you, land, water, and air, is moving at the same speed. This seamless motion is due to inertia, the principle that objects in motion stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. At the same time, the Earth's rotation generates angular momentum, which keeps everything from oceans to air currents aligned and moving in harmony with the planet's spin. Now, imagine that spin coming to an abrupt halt. Earth stops dead in its tracks for just 10 seconds. What happens to the angular momentum that has been keeping everything stable? Where does all that inertia, the stored motion of everything on the planet, go? Think of it as slamming the brakes on a speeding car. Everything inside the car, including you, would lurch forward violently, propelled by inertia. The same thing would happen on a planetary scale, but with consequences so extreme they defy imagination. Here's where it gets truly mind-boggling. If you're on an airplane traveling at 500 miles per hour, your plane and your body would continue moving at that speed relative to the Earth's surface. But the ground below you? It's no longer moving in sync with the plane. And the atmosphere, which had been rotating with the planet, would suddenly shift, creating a catastrophic clash of forces. What would that feel like? What would happen to you, the plane, and the world below? Before we explore those chaotic consequences, let's take a step back and ask, what would it even take for the Earth to stop spinning? The answer might surprise you. And while we're on this fascinating journey, why not subscribe and hit the like button? After all, it's your curiosity that keeps ideas like these spinning. The moment the Earth stops spinning, the laws of physics break loose in unimaginable ways. Everything on the planet, buildings, cars, trees, oceans, and yes, you, has been moving along with Earth's rotation at speeds of up to 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. If the ground suddenly halts, that forward motion doesn't just disappear. Instead, inertia would hurl every object on the surface eastward at those staggering speeds. Now let's think about what this means for you inside an airplane. Picture a high-speed car crash where the brakes slam on without warning, sending everything inside hurtling forward. But this isn't a car going 60 miles per hour. This is the entire planet stopping, with everything on it continuing at the speed of sound. Planes in the air, while initially unaffected by the halt of the ground, would suddenly be hit by chaotic atmospheric forces. The air itself, which had been moving with the Earth's spin, would no longer match the motion of the halted surface. This mismatch would generate hurricane-strength winds, easily exceeding 1,800 miles in some areas, that could destabilize even the sturdiest aircraft. Would planes fall out of the sky? Not immediately, but they wouldn't escape unscathed. The abrupt shift in atmospheric currents would throw aircraft into extreme turbulence, potentially ripping them apart mid-air or knocking them far off their flight paths. Pilots trained for storms and turbulence might attempt to stabilize their planes, but this is no ordinary turbulence. It's the atmosphere itself behaving like an unchained beast. The sudden and unpredictable forces would make survival incredibly slim. And it doesn't stop there. The surface of the Earth would essentially become a massive conveyor belt, flinging everything eastward. Skyscrapers would topple, vehicles would be launched into the air, and entire oceans would surge across continents, creating colossal tsunamis. Can you imagine being on a plane, trying to land amidst this chaos? Even if you managed to avoid the turbulence in the sky, the ground below would be a complete war zone, with destruction as far as the eye could see. Could you survive being flung forward at the speed of sound while seated in a pressurized cabin? It's a terrifying thought, and the answer might depend on whether you're lucky enough to avoid the worst of these cataclysmic forces. But one thing is certain. When physics goes rogue, survival becomes a matter of sheer improbability. And this is just the beginning. Let's zoom out and explore what happens to the planet as a whole. Stay with us. Things are about to get even more apocalyptic. Imagine gazing out of the airplane window mid-flight. The clouds that were gliding gently by, and the sun that seemed to inch across the sky, suddenly stop. Everything outside the window freezes in place. For a moment, it's as if time itself has paused. But this isn't some optical illusion. It's the eerie reality of what would happen if the Earth stopped spinning for 10 seconds. Normally, the sky's apparent motion, the sun rising and setting, the stars sweeping across the heavens, is a direct result of Earth's rotation. When that rotation ceases, even briefly, this motion would stop too. For those 10 seconds, the sun would seem suspended, frozen in its position, as if nature itself is holding its breath. But this unsettling stillness is just the calm before the storm. The atmosphere, which had been rotating in lockstep with the Earth, doesn't stop when the planet does. Instead, it continues racing forward at speeds matching the Earth's prior rotation, up to 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. These unimaginable winds, far surpassing the most violent hurricanes ever recorded, would tear across the surface. Planes in flight would encounter this atmospheric chaos head-on, with winds buffeting their wings and engines. Imagine trying to steer through a storm where the air itself is moving faster than the speed of sound. Survival would be a near impossibility, and from the ground, the sky would look like a scene out of a nightmare. Dust, debris, and water vapor, thrown into the atmosphere by the violent winds, would create a swirling, apocalyptic haze. The sun might appear dimmed or distorted, casting strange, unsteady shadows. In some areas, the atmosphere would compress violently, generating shock waves and causing sudden pressure changes that could affect everything from weather patterns to the structural integrity of buildings. Now, picture yourself on that plane. You glance out the window, watching the sky darken and churn as the atmosphere whips into a frenzy. You'd see clouds moving in directions they were never meant to, perhaps even spiraling into massive cyclones. Would you believe your eyes? Or would panic set in as the laws of nature seemed to crumble around you? For those 10 seconds, the sky would become a theater of chaos and awe. But this fleeting moment would be only the start of Earth's unraveling. Next, let's dive deeper into the long-term consequences of this catastrophic event. How would the planet recover? Or could it? Stay tuned, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's zoom in, inside the airplane cabin, where you're sitting comfortably with your seatbelt on, perhaps sipping a drink or flipping through a magazine. Suddenly, without warning, the Earth stops spinning. What happens to you in those first few seconds? Would you even realize what's going on? At first, it might feel like hitting the world's most violent patch of turbulence, but unlike any turbulence you've ever experienced, this comes with no warning. Passengers and objects not secured would be thrown forward with tremendous force, as the plane's forward motion meets the chaotic atmospheric winds caused by the Earth's sudden halt. Drinks, laptops, and tray tables would turn into dangerous projectiles, flying across the cabin. Seat belts would be your only chance of staying in place, but even then, the jolt could cause serious injuries. Imagine being in a bottle that's suddenly shaken violently, not just up and down, but in unpredictable directions. Now, let's talk about cabin pressure. Commercial aircraft are pressurized to keep passengers comfortable at high altitudes, but the extreme atmospheric turbulence outside could destabilize that delicate balance. Rapid shifts in air pressure might cause your ears to pop painfully, or even rupture eardrums. For those prone to motion sickness, the relentless shaking would likely trigger nausea almost instantly. Breathing might also become difficult as the aircraft struggles to maintain cabin stability. Would passengers even have time to scream? Perhaps, but the chaos would unfold so quickly that many wouldn't understand what was happening until it was too late. The sound of loose objects crashing, the sharp turbulence jolting the plane, and the sheer terror in the cabin would be overwhelming. Even seasoned flyers, accustomed to bumpy rides, would recognize this as something far more catastrophic. And, while you might be focused on your own survival, the pilots would be fighting a battle of their own. They'd have to regain control of an aircraft tossed around like a leaf in a storm, their instruments likely malfunctioning due to the rapid shifts in atmospheric pressure and wind forces. Could the plane stay airborne in such conditions? It's a grim possibility, but the odds would be stacked against it. This level of chaos, compressed into just 10 seconds, would feel like an eternity. And the question isn't just whether you'd survive, it's what would happen after the shaking stops. Would the skies calm down? Would the Earth return to normal? Or would this be the beginning of an irreversible chain reaction? As we move forward, let's explore the broader, long-term effects on our planet after those 10 harrowing seconds. Don't forget to hit that like button if you've made it this far. It helps us keep diving into wild scenarios like this one. The fate of the airplane itself hangs in a delicate balance when the Earth suddenly stops spinning. As the ground beneath ceases its motion, the atmosphere above doesn't. The air keeps rushing forward at up to 1,000 miles per hour, creating catastrophic winds and turbulent chaos. In these conditions, what happens to the plane you're flying in? To stay airborne, planes rely on one simple principle: lift. Lift is generated when air flows over the wings, creating the upward force needed to counteract gravity. But when the atmosphere around the aircraft turns into a maelstrom of unpredictable high-speed winds, that delicate balance is thrown into disarray. The sudden wind shear, sharp changes in wind speed and direction, could make it nearly impossible for the aircraft to maintain a steady flow of air over its wings. This instability might cause the plane to lose lift, sending it into a dangerous stall. Engines, too, would be under immense stress. Jet engines work by taking in air, compressing it, and igniting it to produce thrust. But in a scenario where the surrounding air is moving erratically or at breakneck speeds, engines could choke on debris or fail to maintain consistent airflow. Even advanced modern aircraft systems aren't designed to handle atmospheric conditions akin to a global hurricane. If the engines were to flame out due to these extreme conditions, the plane would be left gliding, if it hasn't already lost lift and spiraled out of control. Then there's the challenge for the pilots. Even the most experienced crews would face an almost impossible situation. Instruments designed to measure wind speed, altitude, and heading would give wildly fluctuating readings as the winds batter the aircraft from every angle. Maintaining control would feel like trying to balance a feather in a wind tunnel, with turbulence tossing the plane in all directions. pilots would be wrestling with forces far beyond what even the most rigorous flight training prepares them. 4. And let's not forget the structural limits of the airplane itself. Aircraft are built to withstand turbulence and pressure changes, but there's a breaking point. The violent forces generated by the shifting atmosphere could cause the plane's wings to flex dangerously or even snap. The fuselage could buckle under the strain, especially if it's struck by debris flung around by the high-speed winds. So, what happens when you combine hurricane-level winds with a steel tube hurtling through the atmosphere? The short answer, nothing good. The chances of an airplane remaining stable, let alone surviving intact, in such conditions are slim at best. But even if the plane manages to stay in the air, there's still the question of what comes next. Could it find a safe landing zone amidst the chaos on the ground? Or would it be forced to navigate a world transformed by those 10 catastrophic seconds? Let's find out as we delve deeper into the aftermath of Earth's sudden stop. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a second of this wild journey. As the 10 seconds of stillness end, Earth begins to spin again, and the world braces for a second wave of chaos. While the initial halt sent the atmosphere and everything on the surface hurtling forward, the restart of rotation would amplify the destruction, creating an entirely new set of challenges. It wouldn't feel like a gradual return to normalcy. It would be more like Earth itself snapping back with a vengeance. When the planet resumes its rotation, angular momentum would reassert itself, causing another violent shift in motion. The atmosphere, still recovering from the first shock, would now clash with the returning movement of the ground, producing a secondary wave of high-speed winds and turbulence. If you thought the initial stop was catastrophic, the restart could feel like nature doubling down as shock waves ripple through the air and across the surface. For planes still in the air, the consequences would be dire. The aircraft that managed to stay aloft during the initial chaos would now face renewed turbulence. The shifting winds, coupled with unpredictable atmospheric patterns, would continue to destabilize flight paths. Pilots, already struggling to regain control, might find their efforts thwarted as the Earth's restarting spin throws instruments and navigation systems into further disarray. Planes that lost engine power or structural integrity during the catastrophe first event would be at even greater risk now, as the atmosphere once again turns into a churning tempest. Passengers inside the cabin would feel the renewed jolt. It's like being on a spinning merry-go-round that suddenly jerks back to life after stopping. It's disorienting, violent, and nearly impossible to regain balance. For those who survived the initial terror, the second wave would be just as harrowing, with turbulence shaking the cabin violently and loose objects continuing to fly. Injuries from impacts, pressure changes, and structural damage would compound, leaving passengers clinging to their seats in sheer desperation. On the ground, the aftermath would be equally catastrophic. Buildings already weakened by the initial halt might collapse entirely, and debris scattered across the landscape would become projectiles as the ground resumes spinning. Oceans, displaced by the sudden stop, would surge back in massive waves, flooding entire regions and leaving destruction in their wake. Recovery efforts would be monumental as the world scrambles to assess the damage, rescue survivors, and understand the full extent of the catastrophe. The question is, could the world ever truly recover from such an event? Planes might eventually stabilize or crash land, but the scars left by those 10 seconds and the chaotic restart would reshape life on Earth as we know it. And for those who lived through it, the experience would remain a haunting memory of a time when the very foundation of our planet betrayed us. So, would the restart feel like Earth's revenge for those 10 seconds of chaos? Absolutely. But it also raises another question. Could such an event ever happen? Or is this purely a thought experiment? In our conclusion, we'll examine the science behind this scenario and what it teaches us about the delicate balance of our spinning world. Stay with us, and if you're still here, now's the perfect time to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of our universe. After exploring the chaos and destruction caused by Earth stopping for just 10 seconds, it's time to step back and consider the bigger picture. What does this thought experiment teach us about the importance of Earth's rotation and the delicate balance that makes life as we know it possible? Earth's rotation does so much more than create the illusion of a rising and setting sun. It's the invisible engine driving our planet's stability. From the gentle flow of air currents that shape weather patterns to the predictable cycles of day and night, rotation keeps everything in sync. It stabilizes the climate, ensuring that energy from the sun is distributed evenly across the planet. Without it, life would become unrecognizable. Take aviation, for example. The smooth, predictable atmosphere we rely on for safe flight would no longer exist if Earth's rotation stopped permanently. Planes would struggle against chaotic weather systems, which would form in the absence of the Coriolis effect, a phenomenon caused by rotation that influences wind and ocean currents. Without it, the planet's weather would descend into apocalyptic extremes, with massive storms raging unpredictably and regions facing unrelenting heat or freezing cold. And then there's the issue of survival itself. If the Earth stopped spinning for good, one side of the planet would be locked in perpetual daylight, scorching under the unrelenting sun, while the other side would freeze in eternal night. Ecosystems would collapse, agriculture would become impossible, and humanity would face challenges we can barely imagine. This mind-bending thought experiment is a stark reminder of just how fragile and fascinating our existence on this spinning rock truly is. It's easy to take the gentle hum of Earth's rotation for granted, but it's the reason we have seasons, tides, and even the air we breathe. Without it, life as we know it wouldn't just be different. It might not exist at all. So, the next time you gaze at a sunrise or feel the breeze on your face, take a moment to appreciate the incredible forces at work behind the scenes. Our planet's rotation is a silent, steadfast force, keeping the rhythms of life in motion. And while the idea of it suddenly stopping is terrifying, it's also a powerful way to remind ourselves of the balance that sustains us every day. If you've enjoyed this journey into the extraordinary, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more explorations of the mysteries that shape our universe. And as always, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Could humanity survive if the Earth ever stopped spinning? Or is our survival tied inseparably to this cosmic dance? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.